Why do people cling so hard to an identity? Because they don't know who they are. Why do people cling so hard to productivity? Because they don't know what they want. If you knew what you want, and I'm not saying like what society tells you what you want, but what you truly want, you might care less about productivity. Or you might harness productivity to really make that thing count.
Khe Hy, thanks for joining me on Meld, man. I'm so excited to have you here.
I am thrilled to be on. It is awesome to be here, Josh. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's awesome, man, because usually I'm the one reaching out to people on Twitter like all the time. The reason why I started this podcast, and it was so refreshing and so awesome to see you like in my inbox, like chatting me up. And I was like, dude, like, yeah, I've been following you for like 8 months, and I haven't even messaged you yet. So, dude, I'm so thankful that you came and knocked on my door.
Hey, I've been known to slide into some DMs and introduce myself and see how we can be helpful. And it's the cool thing about Twitter. We were talking about this the first time we met. Is we've got this tribe, right? Like we're like in the same tribe, and it's like crazy to not meet your fellow, tribes people.
Exactly, and it's social media for a reason, right?
Exactly,
it's not just media. And that's what I love about it, because like I've been seeing some of your like YouTube videos, I've been seeing some of the stuff you're posting on Twitter, and it's cool to interact that way. And you can even just comment on things, but then having this conversation with you is like a whole other level. It's like a whole, I don't know. It's really interesting, because I'm sure a lot of people, we'll get into this, we'll get that from like your course, and they'll be able to like chat with you, they'll be able to learn from you. But even just having these long form conversations is just so different than just 140, 280 characters on Twitter.
Totally. And it is, I'm really with the social part. People ask me questions all the time in DMs. I respond with like 5-minute Loom videos, people I've never met before. I just love I love the social interaction, especially like before when we were traveling a lot. I would always tell people that anytime I'd fly into a new city, London, Toronto, or not new, but like a city I hadn't been to in a while, half of the people that I would meet up with in person were people I met on Twitter. And that was, people look at me like I had 4 heads. And to me, that is completely normal.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, right? And it's interesting because you have a pretty big following. Like, how did that happen? Like, was it slow over time? Have you been there on the platform for a long time, like a slow grind, or how has that been?
Oh man. So my nickname for myself, or actually one of my coaches gave it to me, Billy Bross, is the fast tortoise. So I'm not, if you use a baseball analogy, I'm the guy that tries to get hit by the pitch, draw the walk, bunt. Like I just want to get on first base and then just keep getting on first base over and over and over and over again. I'm not trying to hit home runs, but I'm not trying to hit doubles, but I'm not trying to hit grand slams. Like I love the slow and steady incremental growth. I like playing long games. And so you could see that, and we could talk about how that's influenced much of my work. To answer your question, Twitter specifically is very top of mind because I've been on Twitter for probably a decade now, but I never was like good at it, in that I never had a strategy. I never queued my tweets. I never wrote tweet storms. I didn't know the rules of the algo. I just kind of like tweeted my random, opinions and quips and all that. And I would say until February 20th of 2022, so let's timestamp it, I had 17,200 followers. And that was accumulated over probably a decade. On February 20th, I decided that I wanted to open up a new marketing channel for RadReads, and I wanted to test my hand at Twitter. And so I just made a commitment that I would try to queue 2 tweets a day and do 2 tweet storms a week. And I wanted to keep my personality, my style on Twitter. You would know better what my style is than me, but I wanted to keep my personality on Twitter. I didn't want to be one of those like growth hacky accounts that's lost its soul, right?
Yeah, I know the ones you're talking about.
You know the one, the fortune cookie ones and all that. So, I for those of you who don't know me, like I am a generalist. Like I like to write about productivity, about mortality, about relationships, about family, about money, about growing a business. Like I don't want to be pigeonholed into one category of topics. Like I know that some people say niche down. I would get bored. So I keep it very, very broad. So February 20th, I'm like, I'm going to try this. And as of this morning, it was 27,400 followers, but who's counting? So 7,200 followers in 2 months.
Wow. So that's just consistency, right? Like that's the slow build of just every
Fast
day,
tortoise.
every week.
Yes, but here's the crazy thing about Twitter and about things with built-in viral loops, which we should also talk about, is that classic 80-20 rule. 80% of those followers came from 20% of the tweets. And specifically, they came from 2 tweets, one of which I didn't even write myself.
What? It was like a shout out?
I was on one of those mega lists. Like, here are the people to follow for philosophy. Here are the people to follow for productivity here. But the person had 120,000 followers who shared it.
Oh yeah, that's going to help.
So that
Huge.
was about 8,000. No, what was it? Not 8,000, maybe 6,000 followers. That one. I didn't even know the person. We're both Notion ambassadors. So he probably knows me through the Notion community, but I've never interacted with him ever on Twitter.
Wow. And that's the power of just like putting things out there, right? Like you've been writing your blog for what, like over a decade now, right?
Since 7 years.
7 years. Okay, so not quite a decade.
Yep.
You'll get there soon.
I'll get
like
there.
It's
Fast
going
Tortoise is getting there. He's sprinting towards the finish.
Okay, so dude, let's back up then. I want like maybe for you to kind of like introduce like what you do and how you started all that. So for like people listening who are like, who the hell is this guy? Like,
who is this dude
like, you got them hooks now. Like, now it's time to go back.
Yeah, I will show you how to get 7,200 followers in exactly 60 days with no effort required. No, hello everybody. My name is Khe Hy and I'm the creator of RadReads. RadReads is a blog, an email newsletter, and social media account, as well as an online education company. And we can talk about the courses that we run. We also have a small consultancy. But before we get into all of that, I should just give you some backdrop that this is my second career. So I had a first career that I'm turning 43 in July. So I had a first career that took me from age 21 to 35, and I worked on Wall Street. I was a suit, who wore a suit, who did the 12-hour-a-day grind, who used Microsoft Outlook and BlackBerries, and who did all of that corporate stuff. And I did that corporate stuff for 14 years. I had a really good career there. I made good money, good enough to be able to take some time off, not good enough to be able to never work again, far from it. I grew up in New York City and I live in LA, so I always say that I have a very strong preference for high cost of living cities. So I worked on Wall Street and had the opportunity to take some time off. I was maybe not burnt out. I'd say I had a third of a life crisis at age 35. I'm like, am I really going to be a suit for the rest of my life? And I'm like an internet kid. I grew up on 28.8 modems and Usenet groups and like all that stuff. I love the internet. So I was like, okay, am I going to do this Wall Street thing for the rest of my life? No, but I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I took like 18 months of savings. I talked to my wife. We had a 1-year-old at the time. And I said, how do you feel if this money went to zero? And she's like, cool, because we were lucky to have other savings. And I said, okay, we're going to use this money to live. It was roughly 18 months of living expenses. And I'm going to just try stuff for the 18 months. And if it fails, I'll just go back and get a job on Wall Street or wherever. I thought maybe like Facebook or Google or something like that to mix it up. And if it goes well, the world is our oyster, baby. And so 18 months, and keep in mind, I love the internet, but no following, no like experience doing any of that stuff in 2007. So for your listeners that are like, oh, like it's easy for him to say that because he had this or he had that. Clean slate. 2015, May of 2015, zeros everywhere. No followers. I mean, I had Facebook friends. That's it.
Okay, I want to get into that, and I want to ask you too before we even go further. Like, what was your awakening moment? Like, obviously, there was some kind of entrepreneurial awakening or something. Like, was it a drastic thing for you that was like, whoa, like I need to do something else? Or was it like a slow kind of thing? Because when I ask this question to some people, it's one of those two things. It's like, oh, it happens over time. There's never one moment. But did you ever have like an entrepreneurial awakening moment?
It was, I hate to disappoint, but I'm in the slow burn camp where it's you kind of asking yourself, is this really what I'm going to do? I think that what accelerated it was having a child. Because when you have a kid, my daughter was born when I was 35 or 34. When you have a kid, so like take age 26 to 34 when I was single, and then I met my wife, and then we got married, no kids. Those 26 to 34, those 8 years just felt like a giant blur. Or it's like you couldn't tell if it's like 8 years or 6 years or 4 years, and like birthdays didn't even really matter because you were like, you weren't in your 40s yet. Then the minute you have a kid, you're like every time just becomes crystal clear. Especially with the first kid, you're like, oh, the baby is 24 weeks old. You're like 24 weeks, like what the hell just happened in the past 24 weeks? And time becomes, then it's their first birthday. You're like, oh wow, it's your first birthday. And then now like my daughter just turned 8. She's basically half of her time living at home's done. And she's still my little baby. Like she still adores me, like she's not like one of those preteens that's like, screw you, dad, you're lame. Like she worships, like not worships me, but she loves me. And so I think the passage of time became much clearer. And when you're kind of in this job that's kind of meh, you're like, oh, that's another year. Then it was like, oh, am I just going to keep watching these years rack up? So that was one of them. The other was there was a few moments where kind of in my old world, I was just like, I don't vibe with this mindset. So one of them was I was one of the kind of Bitcoin people, and I just love to talk about it. And I would always bring it up in meetings, and they were kind of like, shut up, tech boy. They're like, we're not. So it's like, I just like quietly bought some, and then, we'll just call it a day. But I was just for an industry that prides itself for being so on the cutting edge and so innovative, they would not entertain a simple conversation about Bitcoin. Like, you guys are just, it's not even a judgment on them. It's just a judgment. It's an assessment on who I wanted to spend my time with. Like, I want to opt into people that find this as interesting. I had no idea whether it was going to be good or bad. I just thought it was fascinating. And can we at least talk about it and consider what it could look like? Right. So that was one. Another was this one I'll remember often. It's probably the closest thing to a moment where I got criticized in one of my year performance reviews for being too good of a manager. They're like, you spend a little too much time caring about your direct reports. And it actually makes sense because Wall Street has a horrible track record of management. It's kind of like, show me what you've done. What have you done for me lately? Next. And here I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, again, it was a choice to opt out of a conversation. So long-winded answer to your question.
Yeah, totally. And what's interesting to me is like most people, when they have a kid, is like the time when they don't want to make these big changes. Like, oh, okay, well, I have a kid. They'll make excuses, right? Like, well, I should just stay here. It's a safe thing to do. You obviously took a big leap of faith, and you took a little bit of a risk there. So what was like the thought process like for you to do that? And like, maybe do you have any anything that you could say to people who are maybe in the same boat or maybe thinking about it and they're like, I want to make the leap, but I can't?
Excellent question. Just to give you the scale, I don't want to share the exact numbers, but this will give you some perspective. I was paid very well in that industry. It's an industry that grossly overpays people, myself included. My best year was in 2014 or 2013. I can't remember exactly. My best year as an entrepreneur was last year. So that was 9 years later. My best year as an entrepreneur, I made 10% of what I made as my best year on Wall Street. So you could think about it in a few ways. I was either grossly overpaid or I'm a shitty entrepreneur. You could kind of, it's probably somewhere in the middle. But it just shows you that like, it was very financially risky. I still haven't like, I'm not even close to like, if I just stayed there, like my net worth would be so different. But We can talk about why I don't think that matters. Yeah. So to the question about people wanting to do it, I would say a few things. One, I would say first check, is it a pull or is it a push? Okay. So a push is like you're running from something. So maybe you lack self-confidence in a role, or you don't have that oomph to get you promoted, or maybe you just know you're not giving it your all, or you shy away from conflict, which lets people take advantage of you, or you're not receptive to feedback, so you can't grow and you take it personalized feedback. If you're getting pushed because of those reasons, you're running from something, chances are whatever you run to, all those problems will still transcend, right? If you're bad at receiving feedback on Wall Street, you're going to be bad at receiving feedback as an entrepreneur. The stakes might be actually 10 times higher because you're more leveraged to your business outcome. So push versus pull would be the first thing to examine. The second thing is to really think about what identities matter to you. So, for example, I was a managing director on Wall Street, which is kind of the highest title. It's not like in the management zone, but it's the highest. It's like, one level below partner, right? And so in cities with big financial service hubs, when you say to people, I'm a managing director, and they look at your age and you're like, you're 33 years old, it's an immediate status. Whether it's a PTA meeting with the new parent friends you just made, or at a coffee shop where you strike up conversation, or I wasn't doing it, but you're chatting up someone at a bar and flirting or whatever, people instantly know because it's a known identity. When you leave that, especially for something less known, because I didn't know what I was going to be, you take picture a giant piece of glass and a sledgehammer, and you take a sledgehammer to your identity. Because you're no longer, right? I quit. I'm no longer Khe. I'm Khe, the former managing director. That's not the same thing.
Right. Did you have an identity crisis?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. It's very hard to navigate in modern society, maybe Western modern society, especially in kind of the social circles where we occupy, without an identity. Everyone's something. I'm a solo creator. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a partner. I'm this, I'm a CrossFitter. People love identities. And when you take a big part of people's identities, right? Here's a test for your listeners. Actually, I'll ask you, but it's a test for your listener. You go to a party, a bunch of people your age, kind of your world, but you don't know anyone. So everyone's meeting each other for the first time. How long into the conversation do you think what you do for work comes up?
Oh, interesting. Like, was someone asking you, or you were asking
Or you
them?
might volunteer it, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm assuming it would come up pretty early, right? Because you want to know, okay, well, what does this person do? You're going to put them not in a box, but just kind of like you're putting a cloak over them. Okay, I kind of know what you do. Yeah.
It's a cloak, or I would say maybe it's like you're doing a triage.
Right. Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
like, do I want to talk to a lawyer, or do I want to talk? It's just the easiest. It's the easiest triage to do.
Yeah. Do you have any? Actually, I want to ask you. Flip side of that, instead of asking people what they do you have any like interesting questions that you ask to kind of like learn more about people?
I always ask people, how do you spend your time? Because at least it doesn't give them the pressure of a job. The other thing is like, what do you do? Is a lot of stay-at-home moms find that question like very triggering. And so it's just something to keep in mind that, again, it's like they talk about identities. Women who have kids and leave the workforce to raise their kids, often they have an identity. They might have been an aspiring lawyer, and then they take 2, 4, 6 years to be a mom, stay-at-home mom. They do not like the identity of stay-at-home mom, but they have smashed their old identity to smithereens, and it's very, very hard, especially if you don't know yourself, right? I think we'll talk about this throughout this podcast. It's like, who are you? What makes you come alive? How do you define yourself? Where do you define your own self-worth? Not contingent on how others define it, right? If you can't answer those questions, it's much easier to be like managing director at BlackRock, 31 years old, scorecard.
So I guess like flipping it back to you, how would you describe yourself now? Like what you're doing, how you spend your time, how do you frame, how do you think about your identity?
Yeah. I've done a lot of spiritual work to kind of just let go of identities and just being like, I am. But the way I would answer it, it depends on the situation. Usually I say, I'm Soraya and Amelie's dad. So those are my kids. Because that is actually, I would say that Eastern traditions would have an issue with that. But to me, that's just like, because you don't want any identity, right? It's because identities come and go, right? But that's probably how I would answer it. Another way I like to answer it was with a joke, because I'm an accidental entrepreneur. Because I actually didn't think that I would be doing this. This wasn't in the plan. Like I actually, we took a big detour, but when we come back to like talking about quitting, I didn't believe, again, the self-confidence thing. I didn't think I had it in me to be an entrepreneur. I think I had this vision of what entrepreneurs look like. Maybe it was, a Zuckerbergian vision of entrepreneurship. I'm like, that's not me. Like, I don't know how to code. I'm not a writer. This was before 2007. Like the word solo creator wasn't really, I'm sorry, it wasn't 2007, 2015. The word solo creator wasn't really a thing. I mean, I joke with people. It's like I started my newsletter years before Substack.
Yeah, that's how you know you're early.
That's how you know you were an OG in the newsletter game.
Absolutely. And actually, funny enough, tooling. What did you use back then? Are you using the same thing? What did that look like?
Tools. So I started the newsletter with 36 people. The newsletter has 35,000 subscribers today. And I will say that I'm going to do just a little flex here with a 54% open rate. So it's 35,000, but 34,000, but we triage quarterly. So we get rid of cold subs religiously, not to like inflate the top number. So when I started, it was 36 email as a Gmail BCC. 36 people as a Gmail BCC. I realized quite quickly that managing unsubscribes on a Gmail BCC is not particularly easy. So then I moved to TinyLetter. I was writing a TinyLetter so I've sent my newsletter. This week will be issue 336. So I've sent my newsletter for 336 weeks. Probably around week 70, I got off TinyLetter and I moved to MailChimp. I was on MailChimp for a long time for the crux of it. And then I believe it was in 2019, September of 19, I moved to ConvertKit. And I haven't looked back. I love ConvertKit. I love Nathan, Barry. I love everything that they stand for. And ConvertKit works really well for my business. But I really, most importantly, I love what the company stands for. And that's really a testament to Nathan, who really is inspiring. Nathan Barry, who's the CEO and founder of ConvertKit. They're a bootstrap, I think 45 million ARR business, like 85 employees, 42% profit sharing. Like those are goals. We will never be that because we're not that business model. But that is goals for me, to be bootstrapped, to reward my employees with a significant amount of profit sharing in a lifestyle, cash flow driven business. Those are my goals, my professional goals.
For RadReads now, so it started out as just purely a newsletter. Like, how did that business come about? Like, how did that start building up for you, like over time when you first started? And you said you didn't even like kind of mean to do it, accidental entrepreneur. Like, how did that all come about?
So I have an entrepreneurial, we talked about the fast tortoise, but I have another entrepreneurial mantra that's called follow the fun. And I just try to do things that are fun. And I try to not do things that are not fun. And so I just kind of see where that takes me. And I have a very optimistic view of the world. And this has evolved with time, that you can build amazing things and great businesses. And if you make a lot of money, I always qualify like, I want to make money, but it's not top 3 on my priorities as an entrepreneur making money. So following the fun is like, I want to really enjoy the process. So I've always followed the fun, and following the fun takes me to some really, unique and quirky places. But so I followed the fun, and so I started this newsletter, no writing experience, no audience, 36 people, Gmail BCC. And I'm just like, I started link blogging. So I'm like, here are 5 stories. This is, again, you got to remember the time period. Like, this is before everyone and their mother was a link blogger. And link blogging, for those of you familiar, you take a few links and you write a little commentary on it. I love link blogging because it's kind of a gateway drug for blogging. It's like, I don't really have my own ideas. It's like what Tiago and others called remixing. I don't really have the confidence to come up with my own ideas, but I would love to kind of piggyback off of other ideas and add my opinion. So I did link blogging I still do link blogging 336 weeks later. We've added a lot of stuff. So I did link blogging probably for the first year. And I loved it because, to me, I was building a business, or not even a business, but just like building a product off of something that I wanted to do anyway, which was learn things by reading and testing them out and like sharing them with people who found it helpful. So that kind of happened. And a lot of the growth of RadReads in the early days was just word of mouth. People were like, this is cool. Like, this guy, funny is like, I call it a Twitter arbitrage, because most of my readers were like more suits. And so they thought Twitter was some like Wild West that like only weirdos and freaks hang out on. And so I just find cool articles on Twitter because it's just in your feed, in your face, if you follow the right people, and I'd share them, link blog them. And the people on the other receiving end, they're like, where did you find this? This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Mind blown. So it was just like Twitter arbitrage in the early days. So that was probably like a year or so. Then would it be helpful if I just give you like a few milestones? It will kind of put the journey in context, right? So quits BlackRock, May of 2015, 7 years ago. It will be like the 7-year anniversary in like 2 weeks, and just starts this email newsletter, Gmail BCC. Does that for about, still does that, but just kind of playing around. And towards the end of that year, so like 8 months after I had the newsletter, maybe 1,000 subscribers through word of mouth, one of my subscribers responds to me and says, hey, you've clearly figured something out. I don't really know what I had figured out. Can you coach my leadership team on how to do it? Like, what do you, I was like, I know lots of coaches. And they're like, no. We want you to coach them. I'm like, well, what am I going to coach them on? Leadership and how to be happy. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I'm just a link blogger, former Wall Street guy, right? But here's the thing. It's the learning in public. It's the, with 5 summaries for, 40 weeks, people had been exposed to 200 of micro ideas of Khe's thinking. And what this gentleman saw was like, I saw 200 reps and I like the way he thinks. I don't want one of the coaches on your list. I want you, because I've seen how you think over the past 30 weeks. So that was the first time when I said, light bulb one, like, I can make some money doing this, like what? I wasn't really trying to be a coach. I have done coaching on and off. I don't really do coaching anymore. So that was the first like watershed moment. Someone wanted to pay you. And I think creators listening to this, and I think what I want you to hear on the receiving side is it doesn't take that many subscribers, right? Like you to get that one person that wants to pay you. And I wasn't even advertising it, right? So that was the first thing. And remember, I said I was going to have 18 months to like figure things out. So that pushed the 18 months, because the 18 months assumed I didn't make any money. But now I was getting some money, and it wasn't, runways building. So the 18 months kind of just kept resetting, like a new shot clock started, with each payment, right? It's like 1 more month, 2 more months. So that kind of actually blew up the 18 months thing, because I was like, well, I could just keep doing this and the 18 months thing is pointless. I didn't want to do exactly that, but that was a boost of confidence. Next milestone, CNN, and within a month of each other, this is about a year, It's like the following September. So it's like almost 2 years after I quit, 18 months after I quit. Newsletter is probably like 2,500 subscribers. It's on MailChimp, tiny letter now. No, MailChimp now. And 2,500 subscribers and 2 articles within 6 weeks of each other. CNN says, meet Khe Hy, Oprah for Millennials. And then Bloomberg writes an article that says, meet Khe Hy, the Wall Street guru.
Wow. And that was just from them picking up your blogs.
I was barely blogging at the time. They were just the reporters were subscribed to the newsletter.
How did you ever ask them how they found you?
One of them's the spouse forwarded it, and the other a friend forwarded it.
Wow, just pure like serendipity.
Pure serendipity, but it kind of goes back to that tweet that we talked about earlier, the 6,000 person retweet, or not even, productivity tweet. I didn't even know the person, but they'd been watching me think in public, probably for months, years, maybe, I don't know. So that's the thing about these, like, even though you kind of like, you expand the surface area for luck to find you by being the fast tortoise. That's why I told you, man, I'm not trying to hit home runs, dude. I just want to get on base. I might even lean my elbow in just a little bit to get nicked, just so I get one more rep on base, like one more on base. Because that's once you're on base, then the magic starts to happen, right? No one really cares how you got on base.
And what is first base for you? Because I think about this idea, I call it just putting nodes out in the network, right? Whether that's putting out link blogging, whether that's tweeting, you're just putting things out into the network, like something, a little glimmer of a star out in the constellation that's the internet.
I think that's a good question. I never thought about it that way. I think of it as just showing up and adding value. And it could be like micro value, like just a screenshot tweet with an interesting factoid. Or it could be macro value, like a pillar, skyscraper post, 10,000 word SEO monster, right? I think I don't do a lot of, I do for different reasons, but I think of it more, like if you look at my newsletter over the 336 weeks, like there's not a lot of like viral moments and things like that, but it's so consistent, and it's so consistently above average. And it's so consistent, my voice. A lot of people, when they meet me, they're like, you sound exactly like what I thought you would sound like based on following you on Twitter. That's a huge compliment to me. If I was trying to hit home runs every time, it wouldn't work that way. Because when you try to hit a home run, you're a different version of yourself. At least I'd be a different version of myself. Right, I'm much more of like a slow moving, consistent, like 1 foot in front of the other. So that was the reps. That's how I think about the reps, and I'm trying to emulate that on Twitter. And I think at some point, maybe next year, I'll try to emulate that on YouTube. I'm not ready yet for the YouTube pressure, but once we get the Twitter thing locked down, which I'm starting to see. The other thing too is once you do this over and over, you start to I'm like touching my body and like holding my shoulders and my heart. It's like you start to really understand the texture of a platform, right? And you just start to see like this type of tweet works, and this type of tweet works on a Saturday, but it's not like, I'm sure you could distill it down into a formula, but I'm a much more intuition guy. And I'm like, I come up with an idea. I'm like, this is a Saturday tweet. Like, this is definitely a Saturday tweet. And then you're like, what's a Monday tweet? Nothing. Because people don't want to engage on Monday, right? And so you just kind of like observe these kind of intuitions. Like a big one for me on this intuition is like email subject line writing. You don't get that 54% open rate with shitty subject lines, right? So I've just kind of built this intuition on email, on writing email subject lines. Do
you document it?
I don't document them, but I try to write 10 to 15 subject lines for every email.
And then you just intuitively pick the one.
Then I don't even A/B test. I'm not like a super quantitative guy. It's something I'm trying to be better at as like marketing becomes a bigger part of what I need to do. But I'll test them. Like I'll text some friends. Like, what do you think of these two? Like I'll do like SMS based A/B testing. But I won't write a post if I don't like the headline. So I force myself to write the headline first. If I can't come up with a headline, I don't write the post.
Interesting. That's a good way to do it though, because that's like the idea, right?
It's the framing, right? Like if you could have the right content, but if you don't get the framing right, it flops. And I think like we could talk about kind of 10K high leverage work. Let's do it later. But the framing is, the framing is the 10K work, and then writing it is the 1K and $100 work. So
yeah, I got a really interesting question actually. Before I get into that though, I just wanted to bring up, if you're thinking of doing YouTube and you love Twitter, I would actually highly recommend looking at TikTok, not YouTube. And it's like, so many people are like, TikTok, I don't even want to download the app. I don't want to be like scrolling on it. But like, it is the video version of Twitter. Like YouTube is something totally different. Like TikTok, you could just pick up your phone, just hit record in the app, talk about something. Like you would have like your headline idea from a blog or newsletter post. And you could even literally read or have the idea, memorize what you were talking about, the key points, and just talk about that. Hit send, and that can just get millions of views because the serendipity on that platform compared to anything else is just like nothing I've ever seen before. Like, it's crazy.
I'm with you. I think I'm showing my age here where like we talked about this when we were hanging out, but I don't have any social on my phone, and that's for like my mental health. And so anything that's like I don't even have Instagram because it just, you can't even like log into your DMs on the web. Like, so there's 3 platforms for our next one that I would think of. It's not podcasting because I want the built-in viral loops. Like anything I do next needs to have built-in discovery.
I think that's a good time to get into that. Like, what are your thoughts on the viral loops?
Yeah. So, I had a podcast for a year and I really enjoyed it, but it didn't really work well for us. Just, we spent so much time on it and it did well for podcasts. I think it was like 3,000 downloads on an episode, which I think is like solid. But it was like 15 hours of work a week or 10 hours of work a week. So it was at a huge opportunity cost. I blog a lot. I like long form writing, but if I were to start today, I would not start a blog. I think that I would start because if you start with no audience, you have to go somewhere with built-in discoverability. Because if you're blogging with no audience, you could be the best blogger in the world. No one's going to find you with an occasional link share here and there. It's just way too slow. So if I were to start again today, I would go with anywhere that has built-in virality and discovery, which is YouTube, the trifecta of YouTube, Twitter, and TikTok.
Right. And even LinkedIn. I'm hearing LinkedIn for content is great.
I know nothing about LinkedIn, so I'm not going to comment on it just from ignorance, but I would, yeah, that's a good point. So I would add LinkedIn there. I hate, like as a former suit, I hate LinkedIn so much, but I mean, we probably could drive a lot of traffic there. So I would start with one of those. And then I think it comes back to the follow the fun. It's like, where is it going to be the most effortless? Because you got to show, I know anything, you got to find the rhythm of the platform. I don't know. I don't even know what it is for YouTube, but probably one a week. For TikTok, it's probably 2 to 3 times a day. Twitter, I feel like I'm getting away with it 2 times a day, but 3 would probably be better if I had the time. So I would start there, but then you go back to things that have long-term compounding. I think one of the issues with Twitter, and I'd have the hesitation with TikTok, is that, there are a lot of tweet storms where I put in 25 minutes and I think they're damn good and they just die in the ether. And I would worry about, like, that's an asset there. And, we're okay at SEO. We're in, web-based SEO. We're good enough to know what it takes, how to do keyword research. We can, we can't fight with the big boys. Our domain ranking's like 58, so solid, respectable, but not great. But I know how it works. And SEO is actually very aligned with like getting walks, right? Like a post gets like three organic visits a day. And then a month later, it gets 10. And then a year later, it gets 50, right? It's very much aligned with kind of the slow. And what I love about SEO is that it self-compounds. Like the longer your post, as your post gets more traffic, it gets harder for someone else to displace it. So there's a built-in accumulating advantage if you find the right thing. And that's very much something that I like, that I believe. I think YouTube has the same thing. Where, and I'm not sure if TikTok has that, where like you kind of like, because I want to play the long game in these things. And I think like if I want to play the long game, YouTube's probably a very powerful long game thing. And web SEO, you know, it has its pros. It's like, who reads on the web anymore? But you'd be surprised. It's fucking huge. People search things, you got search intent, all that. So I would, if I were to do things again, I would pair something up with built-in virality, which is kind of like how you grow the flywheel of audience, like customer acquisition or audience growth, with a longer term asset that just like, it just like pays a monthly dividend, like it's like interest, right? And whether that's YouTube, I think YouTube and Google SEO are the two kind of long-term cash cows. But here's the thing, a lot of people can't play those games. They're not patient enough, right? SEO is, you need to be fucking patient, right? You're like, you could see nothing for 3 months. Then you get like 10 visitors for the next 3 months, right? But again, it's the right visitor search intent, if you can convert it. So that's the advice that I would give. I mean, it also depends on what you're trying to optimize for, right? But I would pair something that's a little faster and a little bit more ephemeral with, but it has like, boom, like you can get 7,000 followers in one day, right? To something that is like a steady eddy cash machine. And then if you put the two together, then you have like an overall brand that like the brand kind of sits above both of them to like unite them. Then you're like unstoppable.
It's like a barbell strategy.
Yeah, it's
almost,
total barbell
right?
strategy.
Yeah.
It's kind of how you would invest your money, right? You're not going to put everything in crypto. You know, you put, 10, 5, whatever your risk tolerance is in crypto, and then you buy stocks, and then you'll buy bonds. Like you buy something that's not sexy, but you know that if you hold it for 10 years, like you're going to be doing great.
Right. And that goes back to your email list, right? Like you were able to bring that with you. Like, again, if it's something like Twitter, like Elon Musk could buy it and shut it down for whatever reason, or you could lose it all, right? Whereas, you have a list of these contacts that you can bring with you and you can transfer that. So,
and the thing that people appreciate, I think email is a phenomenal. I think people kind of sleep a bit on email because it's not the sexy new thing, and people in general don't like email, myself included. But it's like email is just, people love to shit on email, but they still read it all the time, right?
Yep, they're always
on it. It's platform agnostic. And honestly, Josh, one of the biggest things that about my email news, that I send it around 9 a.m. Pacific every Saturday. It's almost like the Starbucks effect, because I'm just a part. I've been doing it for so long that I'm just a part of people's Saturday routines. There's these stories like in New York City where there's a heavier concentration of users, where 2 parents are in the soccer field. It was when I was sending at 9 o'clock Eastern, and they both look down on each other's phone, and RadReads just came out at 9. They're both reading it on the soccer field. So it becomes a part of people's habits, just like the way Starbucks always tastes the same. Just, pick your favorite brand that's known for consistency, that just shows up every single week. And people, when you become a part of people's mind space in a way that adds value and that isn't like showy and pushy and salesy, you become a part of people's lives, right? That's a brand, right?
Absolutely. That's how you build a brand. Then just over time, it's consistency. People are, it's the consistency, man. That's the hardest thing, right? So what is your biggest tips for building in that consistency?
I think the big one is you gotta follow the fun. I once tweeted with James Clear, and I asked him, how long did it take him to write Atomic Habits? What do you think he said? Including marketing.
I don't know, a year?
I can't convert it. It's hard to convert it into years. 8,000 hours.
8,000 hours.
Yeah.
Less than the 10,000 hours.
So it's less than the 10,000 hours, but 8,000 hours, if you work 8-hour days, that's 1,000 days. So that's it's 250 days, working days a year. So that's 4 years. That's 4 years of 8-hour days.
Wow.
So you tell me, who on earth can do something for 4 years every single day if they're not following the fun? If you're doing it for money, it's not gonna happen. You'll make it. I mean, James Clear, I love this picture that he tweeted. It's like Barack Obama's memoir, Atomic Habits, and Michelle Obama's memoir, like most read books in 2021. I'm like, that's fucking life goals, man. Like, good for you.
And the best part is he wrote that years before that even. And it stood the test of time.
Exactly. So to the consistency question, right? I think there's this like delicate line to walk, because when people hear follow the fun, what they say is like, it's like pleasure and like hedonism and just like YOLO, it's like, I just do. I'm like, no. Like, one question I love to ask people is like, what makes you come alive? Right? Because that's different than like, what gives you a brief burst of pleasure that quickly fizzles away, right? Those are like two very different questions. It's something that I encourage people. You got to follow the fun. Like, that doesn't mean that you're going to hit creative resistance, right? Where like, there's going to be stretches where like, I don't want to fucking do this. And in those stretches, you've got to have a few tricks up your sleeve. One is you have to be willing to give yourself permission to take a break. Creators really struggle with that. It's like, the algo is going to decimate me if I take 2 weeks off, or, people will forget that I exist. I'm like, no, people barely know you exist in the first place. You got to give yourself permission to take a break. And then you have to have kind of like, you have to have some tricks in your back pocket, right? So for example, I've got a few posts that they're very easy to write. They're not my best work, but if I'm ever stuck and in a jam, or I'm like hungover or something, I could crank it out in 40 minutes, right? So you got to have a few of those. And then the third thing is and this is what I love about being a creator, just like living your life becomes an engine for creativity, where, you could just like, I don't know, if I was surfing today and there was a collision, this didn't happen, but there was a collision in the water, and I felt something like ashamed or nervous or angry, right? That little moment could easily turn into a phenomenal story. It can turn into a great tweet storm. It can turn into a great blog post. And so you just kind of have to live your life with this lens in the world, this curiosity, where you're just kind of like seeing little bits and shards of your life and other people's lives and kind of spindling them together into your own creative masterpiece. And I think that I think that if you find that process fun, right, that just means you're curious, you're empathetic, you're a good storyteller, you open your eyes, right? That sounds kind of obvious, but like a lot of people like walk around with their eyes, they're physically open, but they're, emotionally shut. Right? They're worrying about something, they're thinking about something. So if you can just approach that life with that, again, it does come back to this concept of, following the fun. And so those are a few ways that I would approach consistency. I'm not a big note taking. I don't have systems to track ideas or anything. Like, I just observe the world. And if I see something intriguing, I try to turn it into a little piece of content right away. So I see a cool quote, I'll just tweet it, add my commentary on it. I see a fun little story, instead of like putting it in my story bank, I just write about it the upcoming Saturday. Make a tweet storm about it. Like, to me, I'm not criticizing people that have elaborate systems, but I think to me, a lot of the elaborate systems, especially if you don't have a lot of body of work to show for, is just it's like a distraction. You're just distracting yourself from some deeper thing. Usually it's like a fear of failure. Like, you just don't want to like put yourself out there, fear of rejection. or perfectionism, which is kind of the other coin of fear of failure. So anyway, that was a little bit of a rant.
Dude, no, like there's so much from there that I'm just like, hey, I'm gonna go back even on this recording and be like, hey, holy shit, like there's so many like just nuggets in there. I'm sure people are gonna pick it out. And there's always like, when you go through these things, there's always like the one thing that will just like come out to people, right? So I love just how much like knowledge and wisdom you have, because obviously doing this for so long, people are gonna pick out the one thing. Like it's never like everything, right? Like you can give people like a whole like library of content and like here's all these ideas, but they'll always remember like one or two things. So there's always something like that. And I think there's already been a few of those moments in this podcast. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit more coming up here because we're almost at like an hour. Geez. It's crazy because I still have so much that I want to get into. I guess the next thing is really like you just said, it's so funny that you don't really have like an elaborate system, but you were kind of like known to become like the Notion guy and like the productivity guru. Like, how did that even happen? How did you start getting into that? Because you said you were a generalist and you didn't want to niche down, but then you ended up becoming known for this thing. How did that come out?
It's a good question. I did and I didn't, because it's if you like go through the history of my newsletters, there was probably a time where there was a little bit more on Notion, but it never like pivoted away from just this generalist approach. Like there's always a few themes that are written about, like I said, relationships, money, productivity, career change, entrepreneurship. Those are kind of like the 4 or 5 themes that are kind of pillars. And I kind of bounce around between those different pillars. Productivity is something that the internet loves. Productivity is something that I understand well. And I use. Like I don't have like elaborate systems for creative process, but like I've used GTD for almost 20 years, right? So I have like an elaborate, I don't think it's elaborate because I've done it for so long, but if someone looked over my shoulder, they'd be like, that's pretty fucking elaborate. But I've been very, very careful that like, I don't want to be pigeonholed as a productivity person. I don't want to be pigeonholed as a Notion person. And Notion is a tool that we use and is great. And I love it. And I could talk about Notion and all its features until I'm blue in the face. But, there was a moment where everyone wanted to talk about it. That moment's probably quieted down a bit. And yeah, when people wanted to talk about it more, I leaned into the conversation a little bit harder. But now that people don't want to talk about it, I see a lot of like, Notion, like people that jumped on the Notion bandwagon and they're one-trick ponies. Right? And look, Notion, like everything else. We saw it with Rome, right? Rome had its moment, and like I go like 6 months. There was 18 months where I couldn't go a day without hearing about Rome. And I haven't heard about Rome in 6 months. And when I do hear about it, it's someone saying something negative.
Oh, that sucks. Which is interesting because I think they recently just like finally put out an iOS app. That was the only thing I heard about it recently.
I wouldn't even know. I follow all the accounts, but again, this is nothing to do with Rome. It's just you want, but again, I'm not saying like I'm sure that there are Rome specific blogs and Rome will be around and that person will be there to serve that audience. Great. It really depends on what you want, right? And what you're optimizing for. Like what game are you playing?
Right. And so like for you, like what game is that now?
Fun. Just want to have fun. Here's the game that I'm playing. I love teaching. And our course, I think the unique thing that we bring to productivity is that we bring the why, where everyone's thinking about the how. They're like, should we use Rome? Should we use Obsidian? Should we use this? And then I come around the corner and I'm like, why do you want to be productive in the first place? And they're like, well, I don't have enough time. Like, why don't you have enough time? What do you want more time for? What would you do with said extra time? Like, well, I'd be a better dad. It's like, you really think you'd be a better dad if you had more time? Like, you could choose to be a better dad right now, right? And then you're like, wait, we started talking about Obsidian, and now I'm questioning why I question myself as a dad. That's the conversation I want to have with people.
Getting a little bit deeper, right?
Yeah.
Like I always see productivity as like the gateway drug to like self-development, right?
Totally.
So is it more so self-development that you're like trying to bring into that world? Yeah.
I would say even further, I would say self-awareness, right? It goes back to that question that we started with, identity. Like, I don't think, why is it so hard? Why do people cling to so hard to an identity? Because they don't know who they are. Why do people cling so hard to productivity? Because they don't know what they want, right? If you knew what you wanted, and I'm not saying like what society tells you what you want, but what you truly want, you might care less about productivity, or you might harness productivity to really make that thing count. And so I believe that this is our unique flavor of productivity. I think the market for, why-based productivity is much, much bigger than the market for how-based productivity. You could read about tactics till you're blue in the face. In the long term, who gives a fuck about tactics? People want to be connected to the deeper motivation, the deeper goal, the deeper vision that they have for their lives. And then they use the tool to get closer to it. But what happens in this world is the other way around. They go tool, tactic, hack, tool, tactic, hack, tool. And they're like, I didn't even know what I wanted in the first place. And so if we can invert that, I think we're just so uniquely positioned. And that feels like, I don't want to see so grandiose like my life's work, but that is just a cool thing to be a part of, to help people discover their why and then show them how to do it with some badass motherfucking productivity implementation. That's exciting to me. Versus just like wake up earlier on a Saturday and like crank out, and gratitude journal. Like, sure, fuck that. Like, fine, like that works for some people, but that's not getting to the root cause of who you are, what you care about, what's your vision for your life. That's what gets me excited.
That's huge because you're right. You're kind of like, you're peeling back the onions. You're going, okay, there's like maybe what you mainly see on YouTube and Twitter and definitely LinkedIn is like the surface level, maybe layer 2, but you're like peeling it back. And it just seems like it's going back to your story of how like you decided to do what you're doing now. It seems like you want to help people kind of have that realization for themselves. And then, okay, once you do it, here's what I did after that to like actually make the shit happen.
Exactly. And what do I want out of life? It's very clear to me. I want to be super involved in my kids' life. I want to be a great dad and a great husband. I want to do cool, creative stuff, right? That's why I don't do Facebook ads. Like, it just doesn't sound like cool, creative stuff to me, right? Follow the fun. I haven't logged into Facebook in 2 years. Why would I start now to buy some fucking ads, right? I'm just not going to do it. Maybe I'm leaving money on the table. Maybe I'm playing the smart decision in the long game. Time will tell. It doesn't matter to me because I'm following the fun. I want the joy today, right? So be creative, be a great dad. I love surfing. I want to surf every day. I don't have meetings till 11:30 Pacific, right? Most of our counterparties are in the East Coast and in Europe. I surf every day for 90 minutes and I leave my mornings open because surfing is very fickle. You can't just go at 9:00 every morning. You have to watch the winds and the tides and the this and the that. And like, sometimes it's really good at 10:45. Sometimes it's really good at 7:40, right? You don't know until that moment. So I've got a text thread with my surf dad friends and we're just like, is it good? Is it good? Is it good? Let's go. Boom. Got to be back by 11:30, first Zoom call.
Dude, that's awesome. I feel like there's a lot of parallels between surfing and obviously literally surfing the web. And like you've been talking about like finding like these trends just serendipitously. And I feel like there's a through line here somewhere with your life, your surf life and like your work life. Do you see any kind of connections between? Do you ever make those connections like on a good day surfing or a bad day or?
Yeah. So it's a little bit long, but I think people will get this. So you have this vision. Surfing is this like interesting cultural phenomenon because like you'll be in the tube in London and you'll see like an ad for a hotel and there'll be like some shredded surfer that's just like live your best life at the Marriott in Cancun or whatever. And so surfing holds this place not just for surfers but just in culture as this embodiment of a certain way of existing, of a certain respect. It's like part like Pura Vida, like 4-hour work week. It's part kind of like counterculture, skate culture, punk rock, like rebels. It's part like fitness, like Roman, fit, muscular, chiseled, like blah, blah, blah. Like, and it's part just like vacation and fun, right? And so it holds this very special place in cultural imagination. So I bought into that. And I was like, well, I want to move to California. I moved to California from New York because I wanted to be a surfer. but I didn't surf a lot. I surfed occasionally. And so I get here, and I'm like, okay, I want to learn how to surf. Like I kind of know what I'm doing. And you go out, it's fucking freezing. The Pacific Ocean is freezing. Even in August, it's freezing. So it's cold. That sucks. Next thing, the waves are in the morning and on weekdays. Even if you don't have to work, none of your friends can surf with you because they have jobs. So guess what? It's dark, it's cold, and you're surfing by yourself. Okay, let's get to the next variable. It's fickle. There are weeks with no waves. You can't like plan your schedule around it, and you kind of like don't really know what you're getting until you're there. Unless you have boots on the ground there, like a friend who lives by the beach, and most people don't. It's too expensive in California. So you're not even guaranteed to have a good time. In fact, statistically, you're probably going to have a worse time because there's more days with bad waves than good waves, especially in Southern California. That might be different in Bali, but in Southern California is where it's bad. So think about that. You move your family across the country for this ad, this cultural representation that you saw in the subway with some like Laird Hamilton ripped dude, shirtless, and it's cold, lonely, fickle, bad conditions. And guess what? On top of it, it's a fucking hard sport. You suck at it, right? It's a 10,000 hours sport by it. Like it is.
Just to do it. Not even good.
Most East Coasters move to LA with that Laird Hamilton vision. And then within a month, they give up. They're like, fuck this. This sucks. Through a stroke of grace or God or genius or whatever, to me, when that happened, I was like, I like this, but for different reasons. I love that it was not about the experience, like catching the waves. It was just like an entire lifestyle. So it's like a ritual, and you like wax your board and you go down, and it challenges your expectations. And sometimes you just sit in the dark with your thoughts. There's no phone. Like you can't like Instagram yourself surfing. Like it's just not possible. So you can't talk about it. You can't share it. It doesn't matter. You're not even good. So it kind of like turned all the assumptions I had about it, that Laird Hamilton vision. And it really turned into more of like, I don't know, like sitting in a dark room by yourself. And it turned out that I just needed that in my life. And it was peaceful and it was meditative. And guess what? I made my friends. I got my surf homies. We got our rhythm. I got better. But again, I'm almost more in it for that whole packaged meditative, contemplative experience with bursts of like shredding versus like every day you're shredding, because it's just, you're shredding maybe like 10% of the days, 20% of the days.
And it seems like almost like a stoic philosophy. Like it just, like, that's what it sounds like, a stoic just, like experience.
It's just like this very kind of peaceful existence with like these little bursts of excitement. But if you're there for the bursts, I think it kind of, it's like what I said about, like, I just want to get on base, right? Like if you want to play for the home runs, it's not the sport for you. You got to like move to Hawaii where the waves are fucking awesome every single day. Get a surf instructor, fight with the locals there, because you got to earn the right to surf those good waves. You just can't show up with money, right? Money, like another thing about surfing is like your money don't matter. Like there's a hierarchy out there, and how much money you make does not register in the hierarchy, right? It's a whole nother status game, right? And that's a status game of respect, and that's a status game of showing up, and that's a status game of time, and like all of that. So I think it's actually a really powerful metaphor for life, where you have these expectations that your life is going to be ripped Laird Hamilton carving out Hawaii waves. But really what it is dark, gray, not boring, but just not what you thought. But that's kind of life. And I don't say that in a downer way. I say that in like a beautiful way. It's like so much like my unified theory of happiness, not that you asked, but I'll share it for you, is that happiness isn't these like explosions of joy. It's just, you're seeing the consistency. It's just like every day. It's like you grind your coffee beans, you pour it in your AeroPress, you have your special mug, You watch the smoke lift up. It's quiet. You hear the birds chirping. Like, you get your journal out, you write, you hear your kid pitter patter up the stairs, you give her a hug. Like, that's happiness, right? Is that it's not like, oh, I won the lottery, or like, shit, I got a 7,000 person viral retweet. Like, that stuff fades instantly, right? The other is like long. It's like, not even happiness isn't even the right word. It's like sustainable contentment. I like the word joy.
Yeah. And sustainable joy,
Yeah,
like just in the
sustainable joy.
everyday
In
moments.
the everydayness of life. Like, to me, happiness is finding beauty and connection and peace in the everyday moments of life. And yes, you'll get the firework, you'll get the big retweet, you'll get the big sale. That's just the icing on the cake. The cake is that everydayness and just being at peace with it. And that's how I try to run my business.
So obviously this is where the through line comes in now. It seems like that's how you've designed your life. Like kind of getting into like lifestyle design now, right? Like, I want to be able to surf every day. I want to be able to spend time with my family.
Sleep 8.5 hours a night, like, is a big one. And I build a company around that.
Exactly. That's what I was going to get into, right? And I'm sure that's what you're kind of teaching people in these courses to, like, here's a little bit of that.
We're teaching people that in the courses, but the cool thing is you can actually, people like, you can't build a company around that. It's like, I just hired 4 people. Watch me, right? And we have a very, very unique company. Well, first, let me say our values. Well, our number one value is we work so that we can live. We don't live to work. And then the next value is we always put our friends, family, and personal well-being above our job. I wrote that because that's how I want to live my life. How on earth could I have employees and not ask them to want to live that life? So then we have 30-hour work weeks, fully asynchronous, barely any meetings, no internal email allowed, barely any Slack. We do a lot of our communication through, like, we use Notion, but through our project management. So we talk on projects and tasks through Notion. We pop in for a quick, like, hey, like, clear this thing up for me in Slack. And then if there's an emergency, we text, get on the phone, solve the emergency. Like, where's the file? Like, I won't Slack that to someone because they're not expected to be on Slack all day. They are expected to respond to their text during work hours, but that's only for emergency. Where's the file? Where's this? Where's that? So we build a company around that, unlimited vacation, and we recommend that everyone takes 4 weeks off. And people are like, you can't do that. I'm like, well, I'm the owner. Like, I could do whatever I want, right? And by the way, we've attracted phenomenal talent. It's a very unique talent, right? They have that fast tortoise mindset, and they might they're in it for the long game. Where I think we can build something incredible in a decade. Sure, we could raise VC money, work our asses off, burn out, grow like wildfire, and get in 3 years. But what would be the fun in that? We jeopardize our health, our friendships, our relationships, our families. I don't want that. So we built the company around that. When you write about that all the time and you teach that all the time, a lot of people, more people than you think, want that, right? They're willing to say, I don't want the upside of a high growth company. If you truly mean like 30-hour work weeks, I'm in. On my own time, I say you could work, if you wanted to, you could work 30 straight hours on a Saturday, as long as you respond to, your occasional inquiries during the week. Go nuts. And we have really good management. We have really good managers. We are really on like a lot of one-on-ones. We're always keeping the pulse. How are people feeling? Always like, how are you feeling? How are you feeling? And we're trying to grow slowly, but we had
same thing that you were criticized for in your banking job.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, I'm consistent, man. Like, everything I said, I've written about, not because I'm this like PR whiz. It's just because, to me, if you're inconsistent, there's internal suffering. Like, whenever you say something different than what you think, or whenever you act in a way that's different than what you believe, there's a little part of you that dies or that hurts. It hurts. You can call that stress. You can call that anxiety. You can call that unfulfillment, pick your word. But my whole life for myself is to get in alignment. It's to be clear with what do I want out of this wild and beautiful, precious life. Being clear that I want it and that I want it for the right reasons, right? I said making money is not high on our list. I will say I'm fortunate that I had savings from my first career, that like I don't have that pressure. But at the same time, if I had more money, all I would want to do is surf more. So why don't I try to make less money and surf more? Like, why go through that extra step? That seems kind of crazy. Plus, like, I'm not getting any older. So like I work an extra year, harder an extra year. I'm 44. Like already parts of my body are not holding up the way they used to. Why put that off, right? Bird in hand, surf in hand, go fucking nuts today, right? So I would love for people to find that alignment, right? Because I think it's not as hard as it seems. It's really like, are you able to create the space to tune into yourself, right? And to just ask yourself these questions. We call them 10K questions. Like, what game am I playing? What makes me come alive? Where am I hurting? Who do I love? Who are my most important relationships? Do I show up for the people that I care about? Who gets my best energy? It's not fucking rocket science. Some obvious questions I just shared, right? Like you can read them in any self-help book, but to actually commit to that process and then use the productivity black boxes to accelerate that.
Right. It's oil on the fire.
It's oil on the fire, right? Where productivity by itself is just oil, right? Who the fuck wants just oil? A lot of it's steak oil, right?
Right. Totally. Okay, so you brought up the 10K questions, and that's obviously a big thing that you talk about. Like, what is even like 10K work? Like, where did that come from? What is it?
Yeah, so I'll answer it in two ways. I'll answer it first from like the framework. And since I know a lot of creators and marketers think about this, I'll then look at it through the lens of like brand and brand identity, and what I call big idea. So 10K work is a simple, we'll put some links in the show notes, but it's a simple 2x2 matrix. And on the vertical axis, you have leverage. And on the horizontal axis, you have skill. So low skill, high skill, low leverage, high leverage. And leverage is not like financial leverage, like getting a mortgage or borrowing money, but it's like the amplification of effect. So I gave an example today. I did a 10K boot camp. It's one of our free promotional events. I've given this talk so many times, but through partnership, like email list swapping and things like that, we had 1,800 people sign up. 1,800 people, 247 people showed up live. And I delivered a 1-hour kick-ass presentation on 10K work that most people have never even heard of before. That's fucking leverage. You know how long it took me to prepare that presentation? 1 hour. I didn't even rehearse it. I've just done it so many times. It's on my mind. I have the slides. I've invested in just putting all the assets and the storytelling together. And then, by the way, how did I get the 1,800 people there? I've been nurturing relationships with creators online for a decade. I texted my homeboy, Tiago. I'm like, yo, you want to do a swap this week? And I had to stay on him. Be like, hey, you didn't respond to my text. Like, you want to do it? Like, I'll trade, like this is a win-win. I'm not hitting you up for a favor. This is a win-win. I went to 20 creators with a win-win. Oftentimes it was a bigger win for them because my audience is bigger. And so they're trading a 4,000 person list for a 34,000 person list. And my open rate's usually a little bit better. So a bunch of texting, a presentation that took me an hour to put together, 1,800 people on the email list. The open rate of the replay email was 70% because people wanted to be there. Like they were intrigued by the event and the subject lines were good. All that, the whole thing, 2 hours of work. I was thinking about it earlier, like how much work does it take to put on an 1,800 person event with 250 live participants? 3 days. It's a 3-day event. It took us, there was a lot, like our team had to do a lot of the logistics and all that. So I'm not taking away from that. But from like Khe Hy's perspective, under 5 hours. Think about the leverage on that. And that's because in that quadrant, I took high skill. I'm a good relationship builder. I'm a good storyteller. I'm a decent presenter. I know how to write good subject lines. And I threw leverage on it. I amplified all of that through relationships, through distribution reach, through partnerships, right? And so that intersection, right? Think about, like, you go to another creator, you say, like, put on an 1,800 person event, 3 days. They're going to spend a month putting that together. 5 hours, dude. 5 hours. But that's the culmination of 7 years of writing subject lines, of building genuine relationships on Twitter, of practicing how to give my presentation, on testing out ideas about 10K work, on writing about productivity, on and on and on, right? But before I knew it was called 10K work, I was planting those seeds in my career over and over and over again. Imagine applying that mindset for 10 years. That's 10K work. 10 years. Why do you think Tiago picks up my text? Let's do a swap. It's not because I just hit him up that morning asking for a swap. It's because we have been supporting each other for 5 years now. And when I've had ask, it's a true ask. And even when it's an ask, it's a mutually beneficial ask. It's like, I'm going to do this for you. Will you do this for me? Like, it's not even a one side. I would never make one-sided asks. Never. That's against my life philosophy. And if it is a one-sided ask, I'll be totally explicit. I'll be like, this is a one-sided ask, and I want to get you back in the future somehow.
That's the mindset, dude. Or so not even thinking, again, even for me, bringing people on the podcast, it's like, I already know that it's mutually beneficial, because at the end of this, not only is it going to go up and it's going to live forever. Like, I have people who like message me from podcasts I did like 2 years ago. Like, hey, I love that podcast. I'm like, oh, apparently like people still find that because, and it's on my website, SEO. We were talking about the compound interest. But it's like, dude, I want to like do more like for my guests. Like, I don't have a massive following. Podcasts don't need a massive following. It needs like a few really good listeners. But then there's also the leverage of like, great, I can take a great clip of something you said, create a video for you, send it to you that you can then post on Twitter. You did, again, 10K work. You didn't do anything, and you can post this awesome piece of content.
Awesome. And I'll be smashing that retweet button every way till Sunday, right?
Yeah, and I was thinking like the idea of that, it kind of drew a memory from me from a book that I read by this guy, Russell Brunson. I'm sure you're from the marketing world. ClickFunnels.
Traffic Secrets or
Traffic Secrets, man. Yeah,
I've never read it, but
it's good. It's a really good marketing book, but it's this idea called digging your well before you're thirsty, right? And it seems like that's exactly what you're doing, exactly what you're talking about. You're just calling it something different, but that's exactly what it is. You're bringing value and you're like making genuine connections. And then later on, if you're like, okay, I didn't think that there could be something specific, but then later on, 5-10 years, like, oh, there is a question, or like there's something, a way that we can connect. How can we do that?
And here's the thing, and this is like a very 10K work type thing. I have been planting seeds for 7 years. And I still continue to plant seeds today. I plant a lot of seeds. Now I'm a little bit more in a paid forward mindset, where instead of like, there's the James that I want to meet, it's more like, how can I support, the next K? I say that with like no arrogance, but like, it's a lot of paying it forward, but still planting a lot of seeds. But think about this now, like the seeds that I planted 7 years ago are all starting to grow now. And I'm still planting seeds today. Like, think about the explosive growth. That's why I think RadReads will be an extremely successful company. It's not the driving factor, but just by virtue of having planted these seeds and watching them grow and tending to them with genuine care, right? Not transactional, like leg humping care, right? It's like I'm genuinely like caring. And that's an ethos that's shared by my colleagues. And I'm just super stoked that, I just think that we're kind of like, I don't care to be unstoppable, but I'm like, we're unstoppable. Because
once the train starts rolling, right?
Yeah, we're just like this giant snowball of love and energy and enthusiasm and creativity that's just steamrolling down the mountain right now. we're not even trying to drive it. We're just like, let's see where this shit goes.
Just focusing on the input, right? The
Exactly.
output will just come out.
And we're
yeah.
still, look, 7 years into it. I'm just like, I'm not trying to hit home runs. Like, I just want to still get on base, right?
It seems like you didn't even think you'd get this far. Like you had 18 months.
I didn't even think I'd be an entrepreneur. I thought I'd be like working in payments at Facebook or, some shit like that. Like, that's what I thought I'd be doing, like using my finance knowledge inside a tech company. That's what I thought I'd do. Really, that's genuinely what I thought I'd be doing.
Wow. Do you use your finance knowledge now in what you're doing?
I mean, now as an entrepreneur, I have to have like a little bit closer eye on like money movements. I think that I probably have more of an analytical mindset where, like I tell you, like, I mean, we don't do A/B tests and we don't do a lot of that kind of marketing stuff. But I think that I have a very, very strong intuition around like I have a strong intuition around the numbers, even though we're not like running the tests, right? I could tell you open rates of different subject lines from memory. And it's just like, again, it's just, I care and I find it fun. I think copywriting is so fun. I think it's just such a strange thing that is so powerful that like most people don't get, like kind of don't want to get.
Where did you learn, and how did you figure all that out?
I learned primarily through a gentleman named Billy Bross. His last name is spelled Broas. And he had a bunch of masterminds, and I hopped into one of his masterminds. Then we did one-on-one group coaching together. It was one-on-one coaching together. It was like the most I'd ever spent on training. And I read like one book by Dan Kennedy, The Ultimate Sales Letter. It was fine, but really it was just practice. Like every tweet is a copywriting rep, right? Every subject line is a copywriting rep. And I think that copywriting is actually, to tie it back to finance, it's a little bit formulaic. Like there's a lot of kind of like formulas that work. Like this, the art is finding the right words to go into the formulas. But the formulas are quite straightforward, right? Like social proof, lead with pain, juxtapose pain versus pleasure, like, curiosity gaps, statistics to like, convince edge buyers, anticipate objections, right? It's not like, it's kind of, the playbook's kind of well known. That's the science of it. The art of it is like, how do you use your words in the science? And that's very difficult. I happen to find it fun. It kind of stays on the theme. I find copywriting really fun because I think it's this kind of like left brain, right brain mishmash where I really think about copywriting through the lens of formulas. Like, what are the formulas? One of our most popular sales emails is inspired by a classic copywriting formula. It's called A Tale of Two Men. It's where you juxtapose two characters, and they start like they were like friends and like elementary school friends, and then they went to college together, and then they started working at the same company, and at the end one of them is the CEO and one's middle management, and like the copy is like, what's the difference? And in this case it's like the CEO read the Wall Street Journal every day. That's like one of the most famous copywriting ads out there. And so that's the formula, right? You take two people and you start them at the same place and you keep moving them through the story, and somehow at the end, one is completely in a different place than the other person. And then the question is like, you fill in the gap. It's like, well, what happened? And like in our case, it's like 10K work. Like one person only did $10 work and the other person only did 10K work, right? And you make it super relatable, but it's that formula. And I had been looking at this formula because this is like, in the world of copywriting, this is like a keystone piece. And I've been playing with it, trying to find a way to use it. And I couldn't. I kept trying and it wasn't working. There were like a lot of dud posts and a lot of like, torn up drafts. Like I couldn't get there. And then one day something just clicked and it was just off to the races.
That's awesome. And I'm sure now you can like remix it and like use it in
Totally.
different ways.
Totally. Now we're like, so we created these two characters, and now we're commissioning illustrators to turn it into a visual story.
Oh, like a comic.
Yeah, almost like a comic. Now it's just going to be flat, like, imagery, but like the goal is to like turn these characters into these like brand characters that symbolize, and guess what? They symbolize our avatars, right? They symbolize who our avatar wants to be, the 10K person, and who our avatar struggles with, our $10 person, right? And so we're juxtaposing actually the same person against themselves.
It's so powerful, right? And again, it's like finding those formulas. Because like for someone like me, like I guess I'm on a marketing team at Superside, but I'm not really like marketing my more creative mind. But again, 10K work, this is where the leverage comes in. This is the high skill. Damn, like you learn these kind of skills mixed with, again, now taking that headline copywriting, using that for YouTube titles, YouTube thumbnails. That's 99% of success on YouTube right there.
Something I always thought about on YouTube is like you have the text in the thumbnail, and then you have the YouTube like SEO text, or like, I'm like, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole, but I'm like, there's probably some kind of science that relates those two things together. And like, what is that science? And there's probably like a formula. And again, the thing, like people hear formulas like, oh, I just find the formula, I just plug in my variables. No. Like you find your formula, and then you're like Michelangelo, you're just like chipping away at the edges. And if you're lucky, your thing comes out to be like a sculpted bicep. But most of the time it looks like, a tomato.
But what's cool is like then you learn that skill. Okay, now you've sculpted it once. Now you can create other sculptures because you know the skill of how to actually sculpt it. Dude, yeah, that's super powerful thought right there. I also want, okay, so back to 10K work though. Why 10K? Why not 100K? Why not like $1 million?
So we had this concept, and I'm a long time Eisenhower matrix person. So but it was like, it was old, like it was, it's like GTD, like it worked in the 90s called, and they said they want their productivity systems back, right? It's not going to work in 2022. And, I'm not going to create a name for RadReads by just like repurposing the Eisenhower matrix. And so, but I wanted something visual, because something visual can travel, like it has meme-like qualities more so than just words. And I've been attracted to matrices, Eisenhower matrix, like Kim Scott has radical candor. There's a lot. Matrices are a very simple way to distill like a pretty complex idea. So I just kept playing with matrix probably for 2 years, trying to like just try different variables of this and this and this. And then the first thing was like, boom, I hit like, it's like, oh, what makes this different? Leverage. People love leverage. Leverage is a powerful concept, and not, you'd be surprised in the productivity world, not a lot of people write about leverage, because leverage by itself is not something that it's not a word that people say all the time. So, people talk about leverage in like the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle, or automating yourself, but like they don't use the word leverage, because it's not, the thing about marketing is you have to use words that people talk with. And no one's going to be like, dude, my leverage was off the hook today, and so it's not going to work. But someone will say my productivity was off the hook today. So found leverage, kind of put that into the matrix. And then I was like, oh shit, this is it. And then Ben Franklin has this like time value of money. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm a money guy. So like, what if we put money in these different categories? And I'm like, well, 10 just feels like a good starting number. And I was like 100 and 1,000, 10K. And then I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like they're like multiples, like they represent exponential growth. And then this was actually later, but like 10K work as a phrase is like a powerful meme. Like it's short, it's memorable. It's kind of has a little bit of intrigue built into it. Like people are like, oh, 10K work, tell me more. Like, what does that mean, right? And then it had the visual representation that went hand in hand with it. And so when you put the two together, and again, so much of this, like I've tested so many other frameworks, and they kind of fell flat because I just would write about them and no one would react. Even when we spoke the other day, I was like, hey, I'm testing this idea of fear-based productivity versus joy-based productivity. And I wrote about it and no one really cared. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not the right framing. right? The concept's there, the idea is there, but the framing wasn't right. And so that's how the 10K thing came about, and then just kept talking about it. It was also, for the marketers listening, it was a big enough container that you could put a lot of things into it, right? Kind of like the 80-20 rule. And it's inspired by the 80-20 rule. But you could use the 80-20 rule for like fitness or like entrepreneurship, right? And you can use 10K work for fitness or entrepreneurship. So it's a big idea container, which is something that's really, for all the brand people listening, like your idea container needs to be big enough that you can like start pulling your adjacent. You might not write about fitness today, but maybe one day we will write about fitness. And you wouldn't want your idea container to be too small that you can't bring fitness into your idea container. That wasn't by design. It just kind of happened that way.
Wow. Yeah, you can grow it. You can kind of like expand on it, and there's branches out from it. The other thing I love about 10K work is when you think about it from like a freelancer, like I guess like a coach or a consultant, or even as an entrepreneur, like running a business, 10K is usually like, that's people's like monthly number that they're trying to reach. Like, we're trying to hit like 10K. Like, did that come up? Was that one of the things that made you go, okay, this is it? Because that's the first milestone people try to hit.
No, I think that like, it was less that, because I've actually never freelanced. So I didn't even know that that's a milestone. But there was definitely, like, if anything, 10K is I'm realizing this now. I think I knew it subconsciously. It's just a phrase that's used often. So like in finance, the annual report is called the 10K. What's a common race is the 10K. 10K is a phrase, even though it means different things in different industries. It rolls off. It's very familiar. And I think, again, I want people listening to know that like I didn't hire like a consulting firm or a naming firm or a branding firm. Like, this is literally just throwing spaghetti against a wall for 337 weeks, but taking the feedback from how the spaghetti falls and trying to like piece it together. That's all it is. It's just a lot of spaghetti against a wall. It shapes, but it took me 7 years. Like, most people don't have this, most businesses, let alone people, don't have the staying power. Like I think RadReads is a decent brand, but it's not really known outside of our Twitter bubble. But 10K has huge, huge potential.
Huge potential. And what are some like specific examples of like 10K work that you've seen from maybe past students or people in your sphere?
There's a few ways to think about it. I already gave the example with the conference that we did, right? So building authentic generosity first relationships where you don't expect anything in return, that's 10K work. And here's the tricky thing about 10K work is you can't just go and do that, 40 hours a week. Like 10K work is seed planting oftentimes, right? Another example, you'll like this one. This is great in Mr. Beast interview on JRE. And he said, it's a little bit like what I said about workshopping headlines. He workshops ideas. He said that there are certain ideas that take the same amount of time, but will get 100 times more views. And he has an intuition as to what that is. And so he just write, the way I write headlines, he writes framings. Like this is like this one. This one takes the same amount of work, but it's going to have 100 times more views. And he's developed that muscle to see that with time. Those are some like more creator focused ones. But if someone were to say like, I just want to start with 10K work today, the biggest thing would be like downloading your brain so that someone else can start to learn from your brain, presumably someone less experienced from you. Well, so for example, like I've been an entrepreneur for 7 years and I have an intuition on marketing. So I'm going to hire a young marketer. I should be codifying everything that I know about marketing so that they can start doing it. So the 10K work it's not only just taking it out of my head and writing it down, but it's putting it in a way that's applicable to someone who's new to the industry. Right? If I could clone even 15% of my marketing experience, our business is in a completely different direction. Right? Because that's 15% of 7 years of experience doing one very specific thing. If I could just teach someone 15% of that, 5% of that, they're off the races. So maybe that's like teaching someone how to write like me, ghostwriting. Maybe it's passing along the brand intuition that I have. Maybe it's like dialing them into email marketing. Maybe it's what I know about SEO, events, partnerships, right? All that stuff. It's like basically taking your special sauce and teaching someone else how to do it.
Right. So many people are afraid to do that, right? They want to like hold it so close to their chest.
They think like, Snoop and Dre, like the protege will outshine the star. Guess what? If that happens, the star is an even bigger star. Did Eminem make Dre less of a star? No, he made him a bigger star.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing, man. I think like if you can do that like multiple times, that's how you grow a huge business. So it seems like that's what you're doing like with your business.
Yeah, I'm just like, we use a lot of systems, we use a lot of processes, we do a lot of retrospectives. Like we're learning, right? Like I throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall, but it's not like willy-nilly spaghetti. Like I'm taking notes, I am observing, I'm looking for patterns, I'm writing pre-mortems, I'm writing post-mortems. Like I am analyzing what's happening. And now can I teach other people how to do it so that they can A, they can replicate it. B, they can add their own creative juju to it, and C, they can do it better than me.
Yeah. And so is that what Supercharge Productivity is? Is that what this new course is?
So the course is, it's really aimed at the individual contributor. And it basically, it does a few things. One is it teaches you the framework. And it teaches you, like, if you're a consultant, if you're, a solo creator, this is how you think about these quadrants. That's one thing. So there's 4 components to the course. That is what we call radical focus. Is like focuses your efforts on the right thing. Then we have, you can think of it as like a pendulum. So radical focus is on the bottom. Then next to it is radical action. Is like, how do you take these things and actually do them? And that's kind of our modernized take on GTD, combining it with the best practices of different productivity systems. Capture inboxes, domains, like, energy management, habit formation, things like that. The third leg of the prong is weekly review. Like, how do you keep yourself accountable, right? Because you need to have like a stabilizer that's like constantly checking in that the process is working. And then that all rolls up into radical awareness. And it's rad because of RadReads, right? Radical awareness. And radical awareness is this why. Like, why do I want this? What are my goals? What is the vision I have for my life? How do I self-sabotage myself? What are my blockers? What are my joys? Like, what makes me come alive? And kind of pushing that downstream into all of those different components.
That's unreal. So that's the entire course is like those 4 pieces broken out. And
each week it's 2 lectures during 1 week. It's all taught by me.
Right. And this is where I'm getting into. It's cohort based, right?
Yeah. Cohort based, we run it 3 times a year.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that. Why only 3 times a year? Why not make this like an evergreen thing that people can go through anytime?
Yeah. So 3 times a year is we spend 2 months launching the marketing for the cohort, because you got to like drum up the energy, and it's a high price point. It starts at $1,500 and gets up to $6,000. So you're not like knock buy my course. Like, you gotta whet the appetite. So it takes about 2 months to just coordinate all the marketing, create it, events, cross promotion. It's a lot of marketing. And I think this is what a lot of CBC people don't fully appreciate, how much marketing is involved in a CBC, and launch-based marketing is very different. So that's one part. The second is that the month that we deliver it, it's like I pour my heart and soul into it. Like, I need like 6 weeks to recover from it. I'm so invested in it. So you have this like 2-month marketing launch that culminates in this like very intense learning, teaching experience where I give my all, and then I just kind of collapse. Like, I'm so drained that I just need like 6 weeks to go back to some of my $10 work, like, just kind of get my house back in order and things like that. I take a surf trip, things like that. If we hit our numbers, 3 weeks is a great business. Like, it's plenty of money. And I don't know how to market an evergreen course. I think that we have one evergreen product, which is a recurring revenue membership. And I find it very difficult, probably because I just don't know how to do it. I find it very hard to sell something without scarcity. And I don't want to create fake scarcity because people can see right through that. And a CBC has natural scarcity, so I don't have to fake it. It's just like, buy it now or wait 4 months. Like it's, and I don't know how to channel. Like I'm basically more of a launch marketer, and I don't know how launch marketing converts into like more traditional, like more recurring evergreen marketing. I'm sure there's like some way that they mesh up. I just don't know it. And so one day I'll try to figure it out. I also don't really want to be in the evergreen course business. I'm not really like a high production quality guy. I'm much better live. I'm much better off script. I don't want to invest in editing and that stuff. Like that is not my strength. Follow the fun. The fun leads me to live. The fun does not lead me to pre-production, post-production, and YouTube thumbnails. I think we might get there from a business decision, but it's going to be like, I'm going to have to see a strong case for fun there.
Right. And for you, it's like maybe the fun is just showing up, recording the stuff.
Exactly. And if we can get it to that point, and I know that new platforms don't work that way. Like I'm a big believer that like the creator has, like I have to learn intuitively what works in thumbnails. I can't just pay someone to do it. Like I don't believe that that works. Or if it does, you have to pay someone money that we don't have. So I'm a very much a get your hands dirty and then pay someone. Because you know that like that's, I would, if I were ever to do paid advertising, I would be the same way. I would get my hands dirty, understand the like I said earlier with Twitter, it's like you just kind of understand the rhythm and the cadence of a platform, and then you pay someone to do it for you. I think you're wasting your money if you do it, and it's actually a bigger risk than wasting your money is just coming across as disingenuous because you don't actually understand the platform. And the audience these audiences are fucking smart. Like if they can sniff out someone that doesn't appreciate the platform for what it is, they will snuff you out within 2 seconds. You won't last.
Yeah. And again, that brings it back to whether it's Twitter or TikTok, like you said, they have their own flavor. It's like, it's a very specific way that people, it's a culture, literally a culture.
It is
We're
a
all
culture.
Individual
It's
thing. Yeah.
Total culture.
It's culture things, dude. But I think it makes sense. And I think just the nature of like, your teachings of like 10K work, it makes sense to do it in this big grandiose way. Like that seems like that's closer to 10K work, whereas evergreen's like 1,000 or 100, it doesn't seem like it's up there.
Well, again, I think the 10K work would be to figure out what is a sustainable business model for evergreen courses. And I just don't know what that is. I've never done it. I hear it's hard. I hear you need paid, or paid's a big part of it. So it's just another business that I don't know anything about. And maybe we're close enough to it that we'll take a crack at it one day. When I think about what we have going on, that seems like a long ways away.
Awesome. So dude, the course, do you run at the same time, like each, I guess not every quarter, but every third of a year, or is it different every time?
It's about the same. There's a very natural cadence. Right out of the gates, post New Year's resolutions, people are really hungry for this kind of course. That's always our biggest cohort. The second one, you kind of have to like fight the elements in the calendar. People do not want to take cohort-based courses like when the weather's good during the summer. So summer and when people are traveling. So summer is the worst time for a cohort-based course. So we usually end our second one that we're about to start like Memorial Day weekend. We're still like 80% US customers, students. And then there's kind of that like post Labor Day push where it's like a mini New Year's where people are raring to go, but you got to be very careful there because then you like brush up on Thanksgiving and Christmas parties and holiday parties. So a lot of the schedule is actually dictated by the calendar. Like obviously that's not set in stone, but like you won't catch me ever launching a cohort-based course in July. Like that's a death sentence in my opinion.
Yeah, which again is cool because the weather's great. You get to go surf and you don't really have to worry about that because you've designed this business in such a way.
I surf every day. Doesn't matter. July or January, it don't matter. I live in Southern California. July and January are the same to me.
That is awesome. Yeah, it's still cold in the water.
The water, but
I guess doesn't matter.
Still cold in July, but
that's awesome, man. Well, we're coming up on almost 2 hours here, so
dude,
I guess
flew by.
Man, you're telling me. I'm like, I could probably do this for another hour, bro. I'm not gonna hold you hold you hostage here, man.
I told my wife I'd be up for dinner at 6:45. So she's gonna be like, where? I'm like, I blame Josh.
Yeah, blame me,
I blame
seriously. But then you
Josh.
can send her the link. You're like, this is why. This is why. Check out this clip. This is why we got this.
I love it, man. That's so much
It'll be
fun.
worth it, man.
So
Dude,
much
this
fun.
has been awesome.
And I love how you just took it in so many directions. I love the creator angle because being a creator is a big part of my life. It's a big part of my identity. It's just what I do a lot. And I love doing it. I hope you could see from my enthusiasm that like, I just love this. Like, I'm not trying to bullshit anybody. Like, I will tell you what works and I'll tell you what sucks about it. And the biggest thing is just tell you how long it'll take. It's just going to take a long time. But if you're enjoying every moment, who cares?
And as long as you can pay the bills, you can eat food, and like you're living inside a home, you're good.
Exactly.
Like, yeah, don't have. I think you're right. It's about that trade off in one way or another. Like, you know, unless you're doing something that you know for sure, or maybe you don't know. Like, kind of like Mr. Beast doing random shit, and he's like fucking cajillionaire.
Yep.
Like, who knows? Like,
but you listen to Mr. Dude. He listened to that. I don't know if you've heard the JRE interview with him. They would. He started when he was 11, I think. So talk about 10,000 hours. So he started when he was 11. He was obsessed with YouTube. Obsessed. He was a very bad student. He had some learning disabilities, I think. And he was obsessed with YouTube. They got a bunch of friends together when they were in high school, and they would get on 18-hour Skypes every day, and they would just analyze videos on 3 people on Skype, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for years. It goes back to the James Clear thing, right? Once you hear that, it's not a surprise. Dude, 18 hours on Skype analyzing videos, thumbnails. Think about it. If you and I did that for a month, we would crush YouTube. Think about doing that for years when you're 11 or 13. James Clear, 8,000 hours. What was our math? 4 years of 9 to 5 days. Tell me anyone that's going to do the same thing by the way, he didn't know it was going to be that hit while he was doing it. He had no idea. He probably had confidence that it would be good. I doubt he's a humble guy. In his wildest dream, he had no fucking idea that it was going to be that big of a hit. Again, my words, not his. But look, 4 years, every single workday, working on the same thing with no validation in it. No one giving you a, hey, great job, James, because you're just sitting writing, right?
no feedback. Yeah. Well, I guess he
got feedback,
and some,
but not like validation. Not people
Not
being
validation.
like, you're awesome, great work.
And like money flowing in for me.
Definitely
each time.
not
Now
money.
it's just like, oh my God.
No money.
From that book again.
Not until.
But again, I think that's, and that's what we're talking about. Like, not really thinking about the cash, having enough to like be able to sustain yourself, have fun doing what you're doing, and hoping and, you know, putting in the value that it will come back in some way or another.
And you know what? I bet if it wasn't the hit that it was, I think he'd still be a happy dude. You know, he's got a 1-year-old daughter. He lives in, you know, he just seems like a happy dude that like, if it wasn't a hit, I think he'd be just as happy. His life would be probably a little bit different, but it probably wouldn't be that different, right? He just wouldn't be going on Good Morning. Yeah, he wouldn't be going on Good Morning America, you know, instead he'd be going on, you know, the Khe Hy podcast, right? Like, that would be the difference.
Yeah, so true, man. All right, to wrap this thing up so you can actually go and have dinner. You're probably also hungry now. I usually ask one pretty big question, just to kind of round things out. Just to keep it ended on a high note. What is something that you're super excited about coming up in like the near future?
I think that coming out of COVID, or whatever you want to describe where we're at, has kind of forced generations of people to rethink what's important. And you could see that actually aligns with a lot of our work. It's just like, what's important to you? Don't wait. And I think that you're starting to see that manifest in things like the Great Resignation. You're starting to see it manifest in hybrid work. You're starting to see a greater amount of compassion towards health and different, you know, long-term illnesses in the workplace, in society. And I think that like obviously COVID was just a global tragedy on such an unimaginable scale and the loss of life. But there's a thin silver lining that a lot of people, one of the big questions that we often ask our students, and I ask myself, is what's enough? And I think COVID realized that, like, if you don't have it and you've got a roof over your head and your family and you're sitting in an apartment playing puzzles and watching Netflix, like, that's enough for a lot of people. And I'm just excited to see the downstream effects on that and what it has on culture, what it has on work, what it has on capitalism, what it has on people's desires. And ultimately, like, the thing that I care about the most is like people's happiness.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it's so great that it fully aligns with what you're doing. So again, like the surfing analogy, what I also find is like you're out there waiting on your surfboard. That wave came, man. Like you're now riding that wave. I think the downstream effect is the wave that you're going to be riding like from the next, I don't know, decade longer from post-COVID life. And that's going to be super exciting to see like your growth and your trajectory here.
Thank you, man. And look, you as a friend and as a thinking partner played a huge role in it. All the people that are, still listening 2 hours later have played a huge role in it. So I thank you all. I'm just grateful.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Any final words? Where can people find you online? If they want to check out the course, I'll put all the links in the description for all this stuff. Anyways, any final words? Dude, the floor is yours. And then, anywhere people can connect with you.
The last final word I'll say is to everyone listening, like, you are enough as you are. Like, you don't need to achieve more to be worthy. You don't need to, get another 1,000 followers to be validated, to be seen, to be loved. Like, you are enough in this exact moment. You do not need to do anything else. So that's the words that I would leave you with. In terms of follows, radreads.co, sign up for the newsletter. We're big email people, help us prop up that, 54% open rate. Twitter is my most active platform. My name is super long, but if you just Twitter space Khe, you'll find me. And then our course, radreads.co/courses. I believe this will be launching just in time for our next cohort. And so I encourage you to jump into that scarcity train, baby, because we ain't coming back until September. So jump into the course. But honestly, like, see if it's right for you. Like, I don't want people taking a course that's not right for them. And I'll tell you that. If you have any questions, just email me or DM me directly. And I'll be the first to give you an honest assessment as to whether it's the right course for you. And yeah, that's it, man. Interact on Twitter. Say hi on Twitter, man.
That's the best part. That's how we connected. Yeah, anyone listening, I mean, you should know by now if you're listening, I'm a huge proponent of Twitter. I can see why Elon Musk is trying to put so much of his net worth into owning this thing at the moment of this podcast anyways. I'll put all these links in the description. So hopefully people will be able to connect with you, find out about the course. And again, if you miss this train, there's always another one. You might have to wait a few months.
Might have to wait a few months, but you know what? We do 2 monthly free events where we kind of give little teasers of the course every month. Like I said, we're good at events. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to, take a bite at the apple.
It's awesome, man. All right. Well, Khe, thanks again for being on Mind Meld. Anyone who made it to this past 2-hour mark, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your run or your walk or your gym time or your cleaning dishes, whatever you're doing. I wish you well. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.